When World War II began, Poland had these borders, and when the dust had settled, they looked like this, with this area being permanently lost to Warsaw and all of these former German lands becoming a part of the reborn Polish state. But given how different Poland looked just 6 years earlier, it raises the question, why? So throughout the Second World War, the major Allied powers, not you, were constantly in negotiations about what was to happen to Poland after they were victorious. At first, the British had hoped for the restoration of the pre-war Polish government who everyone would then negotiate with. But as the Red Army swept across Eastern Europe, it became clear that Stalin had other plans. As such, Britain and the United States had to make sure that the Polish post-war settlement aligned with Soviet security needs. The Soviets wanted more buffer between Moscow and Berlin, and as such, that meant two things: Soviet gains to the west and German losses to the east. A significant chunk of Poland's pre-war population were Ruthenians, Russians, Ukrainians, or Belarusians, and so Stalin wanted to incorporate them into the USSR. Of course, much of this had previously been done under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, but many weren't too happy with that agreement persevering, and so Stalin opted to negotiate with the Polish government in exile. They weren't willing to give him everything he wanted, and so he just made his own Polish government, who soon agreed. To Britain and the US, because getting Stalin on side was the most important part of putting the war behind them, they threw Poland under the bus. The agreement between Stalin and the new Polish government was that Poland would lose most of the lands that the Soviets gained in 1939, and in return Stalin would push for Poland to expand westward into Germany. Now, the reason why Stalin returned these two areas to Poland wasn't because he was a stand-up guy. It was because he didn't want the changes to look like a diktat. It was, of course, but it was enough that Britain and the United States could pretend that they hadn't just caved to a dictator. During the Potsdam Conference in 1945, the Allies agreed that Poland's western borders would go up to here until a permanent solution could be negotiated. So why these lands in particular? Well, for a start, giving them to Poland meant that any potential resurgent Germany would have to fight a much more industrialized nation with a large river as a natural border. Furthermore, by destroying East Prussia and giving Poland Gdansk, the territorial tensions which led to war in the first place were now gone for good, as were the Germans living there. Now, Poland's newfound lands were to be populated by the Polish who were already at that point living in the USSR and those whom Stalin had arrested over the previous decades. And by settling millions of people there, West Germany, or later a unified Germany, wouldn't have much of a claim to the lands. And the Cold War soon meant that there was no further Allied conference on formalizing Poland's borders. But of course, it wasn't long until temporary borders became permanent ones, thereby completing Poland's movement westward.